Patterns of consciousness relate to everything we know about our existence. From the smallest particles to the largest galaxies, you can see the repeating sequences over and over, like Fibonacci, where the numeric representations repeat themselves over and over in nature. And these sequences divide into smaller ones, eventually creating fractals. Hence, everything in our reality as we know it is based on a pattern consciousness. And our reality does not exist in density without that. As fractal patterns weave into different arrangements, they create different expressions in consciousness through contraction and expansion. So a muscle expresses a different pattern when it contracts than when it expands. A rock is a far denser pattern of consciousness than a human being. You can't really phase a rock out of being a rock without violently disrupting its pattern. Somehow, through an explosive force shock, it's stuck in a vibrational phase, which is a very solid state of existence, which consists essentially of tightly woven patterns related to time. If a human being expresses its patterns in seconds, then another consciousness may be able to express itself in 1/billionth of our seconds, and may have several lifetimes within that consciousness. So if a consciousness expresses itself in a fraction of our second, and if it were to observe us, we would appear as non-moving or barely moving objects. So theoretically, we could then suggest that the most dense things on planet Earth are living in a time-space continuum that is much slower than our own, and consequently, they don't appear to move, but they are moving. Even though they are in the same dimension, they are moving. We just don't notice it because it is a far slower pattern than our own reality. That's why it takes millions of years to see grand shifts in patterns on the planet, because things move according to the dominant consciousness in which it resides. A dense consciousness makes things very slow because it serves other patterns that are moving faster. So there's always one model of consciousness that is serving another. Throughout the pattern assignments of this planet, we created a vibrational platform that could house a wide range of geological formations, plant and animal life, interspersed with incredible diversity in elements, water, gases, which all create critical systems of interaction between all of these things. So land masses change, climate changes, humans and all life on the planet begins to change, all as a result of changes in consciousness. Human consciousness, Gaia consciousness, and the consciousness of our entire galaxy, all working as one functioning unit. And this can be tracked every axial precession, which is the slow, continuous change in the orientation of the Earth and the Earth's axis. And that happens every 25,000 years or so, but it can scientifically be documented. All of these patterns influence our solar system because they align with and are influenced by the same process. So you can never be in a consciousness you're not supposed to be in because you're in it. It's part of that design. If we examine human consciousness, it follows suit. As soon as you notice you're in a pattern you don't want to be in, or figure you're not supposed to be in, it's in retrospect, because by some intent, whether conscious, subconscious, superconscious, you've already at some point in some realm assembled the pattern of consciousness that you're in and that you're experiencing at this moment. So it's never wrong and it's never right. It's what you have invited to be for the interpretation at that point in time in your state of consciousness, in your state of being. And you can use your imagination in what can fall within these rules of the game. So, for example, if you are used, abused, harassed, assaulted, raped, whatever scenario for victimization you can think of, you may take it down the road of acceptable and not acceptable. You may accept that you created an environment for yourself that led down the road of pain and hardship in ways where you see your role in that experience, but you may not see your role in an experience where you were vulnerable, for example, being raped or viciously assaulted. You may draw the line there and think, how could I possibly have created this experience for myself? So violent, so helpless. I'm not that kind of person. Well, you may not be that kind of person, but you have a consciousness that has created and catered to a pattern to it at one extreme or the other. So both poles are in full operation, and then you resonate with an experience at a level that is you, but you are not aware of it consciously. If you don't accept this, that we create these patterns, then you're likely going to accept a victim-perpetrator relationship, or that something was done to you outside of your creation. You didn't design it, didn't intend on participating in it, so it is not yours. Yet there you are, in the middle of that experience. So what made it come about? It's a pattern of thought, a pre-wiring of consciousness planted in our DNA through some means, epigenetic triggers, coded sequences, according to our experience, past experiences. There's countless ways that we are immersed in an experience of our own design. Nobody wants to design hardship, obviously, struggle, or difficulties for themselves, because consciously we don't want that. But at other levels of consciousness that we may not be aware of, there is an entirely different structure of experience happening based on what we are, what we know, what we have been, and what we choose to be at this moment. They all collide in a matrix of experience of what is you. You can extrapolate examples of this in how our societies operate. We fix ourselves on patterns based on both poles, so compassion and fear, love and hate, etc. You want to be part of a society, here's the pattern. Drive according to the rules, abide by all laws, administer drugs when necessary, all according to what society has deemed acceptable. Sway from that pattern and there are consequences. Society knows what's good for you and your safety. So you are funneled into a pattern of choice. There's an imposition of patterns, whether you consciously like them or not. Now you can go and be a hermit, live off the grid, be a monk, and disassociate from society, but then you are not fitting into a recognized pattern. So you can't do that among a conforming group of citizens who all agree we have to be and act a certain way. You got to be part of the team. So if you sway from the moralist perspective, meaning you deviate from the extremes of right and wrong, then you will eventually be faced with a consciousness that wants to impose that view on you. And in any developed society with laws and structure, we can see that everything results in violence if we don't conform. If you're not wearing a seatbelt, you can receive a ticket just for not wearing your seatbelt. And you'll get a financial penalty according to the law. And if you get enough of those, you will lose your driving privileges if you don't pay them. And then if you decide to keep driving, you'll eventually be confronted by police and your vehicle will be towed, resist, and you will be taken to jail by force. So it ends in violence. All because you didn't choose to wear your seatbelt. It doesn't mean we shouldn't wear seatbelts. We should. It protects our lives. But there is no choice for you in the matter without the end result coming to violence. That is the pattern that we impose on society. It's an example that sets up a behavioral pattern that is reinforced by society in everything we do. It's an imposing pattern that laws, the judicial system, and policing bring to everybody. We must conform. Otherwise, there will be chaos and anarchy. And since anarchy involves the absence of government and rules and structure, and it's more about absolute freedom of the individual, that pattern is a threat to others that design that system and their controls based on limitation and restriction. So it's about do what we do what we say, because we know what's best. We can't allow things to just be because that does not follow a pattern that we are comfortable with. It's too scary. So staying within the known allows a developed society to continue structure, control, rigidity, and then enforcing consequences if that pattern migrates. See, the more we confine ourselves to dense patterns of consciousness, the more rigid we become, and the more we lose our ability to be flexible at other levels. The law is a perfect example of that. You can't do anything within the government of most nations without going through layers of paperwork, rules and regulations that must be met. Otherwise, you can't take even one step within that system. You need to go through all the hoops. It gets so complex that branches within these systems can't even communicate with each other. You see this in large corporations a lot, because there's a disconnection that happens between the levels of operation when you get to that level, between departments and divisions, which creates so many dysfunctions in how they operate because of the tight controls. So the more complex a pattern becomes within those rigid controls, the less likely it can accommodate a consciousness that invites freedom of movement and freedom of expression. So you can't just walk across the street at any time because you are not aware of how dangerous that is for you. You cross where we tell you to cross. Otherwise, you fit into the pattern of jaywalking. And we've designed that pattern as endangering your life or the lives of others, and it's not acceptable. So it has to be the way that the limitations and controls have structured, or there's a penalty. So what's this leading to? Well, eventually laws will not be what they are today. Prisons as we know them will not exist. I know it's hard to believe, but this is where it's all going. Policing will redefine itself. Government will evolve to promote a greater degree of freedom of the individual, and educational, health, military, pharmaceutical, industrial complexes will all change or fall. That's what's coming, because society is shifting towards freedom of expression regardless of the pattern. Inevitably, this will change human consciousness. It will invite more people to be themselves with less imposition to be somebody else. It will lead to more creativity, ingenuity, invention. And a technology that is coming, it's going to blow you away in terms of integration, driverless vehicles. There's not going to be any more speeding tickets, a system of free expression that caters to your uniqueness. You're going to be able to enter a mall, and that mall is going to know exactly what you need instead of you looking for it. It's going to be a technology that will allow you to integrate and align with any human being on the planet based on an alliance of commonalities rather than differences. Because we have tried to fixate patterns of consciousness onto others, this is the first thing that will change. And you're going to see it changing over time. You already see it changing right now. The system is changing from a system that is imposing to one that is accommodating of all expressions. So human consciousness is now transitioning to one that will appear to be absent of rules, absent of laws, absent of government, absent of policing, because the pattern by design that is coming is one that accommodates fluidity rather than rigidity. I'm going to speak more about this in upcoming segments and explain what the next century is going to be like based on not only what humans are becoming, but how this will benefit our species in ways we never could have imagined.